The title of this talk is a $50 million use case for smart contracts. Little background, my business, how to manage enterprises. I got to give you a little background on what we do so you can understand the context of the talk. What we do is we work on a monthly, quarterly, annual retainer basis with 500 small businesses to provide a stack of professional services. We provide CEO services, we provide COO services, we provide CFO services, we provide bookkeeping services. They have access to a private membership site, they have access to an archive of resources, they have access to a library, they have access to live events. There's a stack of services that we have to deliver and control access to through, everyone say it with me? No, right now we use dumb contracts is the problem. Right? So our business has grown about 8,000% in the past 10 years. We've been named by Inc. magazine as one of the 5,000 fastest growing companies since 2015. I can't do the math in my head, but every year since 2015, we've been on the list as one of the fastest growing companies in the country. We manage over 500 small businesses. We have a full-time staff of about 120 full-time employees all over the United States and a few other countries. This year, our revenues will be about $25 million, which if you keep the rate of growth going, we should be on about a $75 million run rate in around 36 months. So I picked $50 million because it just kind of like sounded good in the title. But here is our use case for how we are thinking through how we need to start using smart contracts. Why do we need to start using smart contracts? We need to start using smart contracts. You need to start thinking about using smart contracts in your business because it's more efficient. You make more money. Who has a business? Raise your hand if you got a business. Raise your hand if you keep your hands up if you use contracts in your business. Contracts to enforce rights, contracts to give rights, contracts to give access, things like that, yes? Okay, so here we go. By the way, I'm also a lawyer. I'm not giving you legal advice, but here's like a lawyer and an entrepreneur with a $25 million business thinking through all the shit you gotta think through with a smart contract, which, by the way, I hope starts to get you thinking by the end of this conversation that you'd have to be pretty fucking stupid to let a coder who doesn't understand contracts law design and engineer your business relationship with your clients or your customers or your passengers or your patients or whatever you call the people you do business with. That's just not smart business. You should hire a good coder who knows smart contracts, but don't let your coder end up practicing law because they don't know what they're doing. Unless your coder went to law school, maybe they do. All right. So, one, we have to figure out, back up for 1 second. The reason why smart contracts are so cool from a business case use is because they are code, right? They're automatic if-then things. The blockchain executes the contract for you. It's a self-executing contract, right? It's like automatic. Everything can get done really, really fast and objectively without a bunch of arguments, which is great if you got a computer having a relationship with another computer, but the rest of us have relationships with people. We use computers to facilitate those relationships. And that's where you start running into problems when you really start thinking this stuff through, which is why the next generation of smart contracts are really, really exciting when you start thinking about what they're gonna be. All right, so here we go. One, the contract has to do some really simple, basic stuff. Most smart contracts today can at least do this. One, define key terms, right? People use words in very sloppy ways, and you might not mean the same thing that I mean when you use a given word, which is why every good contract has a section at the beginning that starts off by defining what we mean when we use this term or that term. Make sense? All right. 2, we have to establish the rights and responsibilities for all the parties. So what are your rights in this relationship? What are my rights in this relationship? So in the context of my business, your rights when you engage our services is you get the right to access one of our live quarterly meetings every quarter. You get the right to access our archives of all kinds of tools and resources and past recordings. You get the right to participate in the group calls that your stack of services entitle you to. You get the right to have a weekly or a monthly or a quarterly call with your assigned business advisor. You get the idea? You get these rights. You also have certain responsibilities. One of the responsibilities is to show up. One of your responsibilities is to pay us. One of your responsibilities is to comply with some of our policies, including our no assholes policy. You know what we call our no assholes policy? We call it the no assholes policy. And it's defined. And that way you can use objective criteria to determine if you are behaving like an asshole and you know how to behave and how not to behave so we don't have to kick you out. Which, by the way, we have a 9-month waiting list, so people don't want to get kicked out. All right. So the contract has to define the key terms and establish the rights and responsibilities. That's the easy part. Like, coders can do that. You don't need to be a lawyer or work with a lawyer or have a lot of business experience or a lot of sophistication to do this basic stuff. Now let's go a little bit deeper. 2, you have to manage access to the rights to different stacks of services, right? So depending on whether you're on a monthly retainer at $20,000 a month, or a monthly retainer at $10,000 a month, or $5,000, or $2,000, or $1,000, depending on what level of retainer you're at, you have access to different services, and those services have to be turned on and turned off by, right now, a smart person. But what I'm excited about is building smart contracts that can start turning on and turning off those rights of access. So think about in your business where you've got different products, different services, different memberships, different levels of access, and you want to start using a smart contract to turn on and turn off and act like the gatekeeper to get access to these services, depending on whether a person pays, how much they've paid for the service. Maybe how many points they've earned in a loyalty program or a contest that you might run to motivate your your customers to behave the way you want them to behave. And you can use a smart contract to control and manage all of that. What's really interesting is when some of these resources and some of these things that you're going to have don't exist in the metaverse, like a live event, right? How many of you have a VIP thing on your wrist? Raise your hand if you got a VIP thing on your wrist. Well, you know, your VIP access may exist in the metaverse, and your VIP access may exist on a blockchain, but when you physically try to go past the security guard into the VIP area so you can physically be in the VIP area in the real world, what's on the metaverse may or may not translate, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see how you take information from the metaverse and translate it into physical access in the real world. Are we going to have smart wristbands, for example, right? Are we going to have smart tokens that you physically carry around with you and has some sort of code that, you know, blinks red or blinks green or opens the door or doesn't open the door, depending on what's on the blockchain. All right, let's talk about taking payments. This is where things start to get really interesting. I'll be doing a presentation later on the basics of bookkeeping, which, by the way, I want to let you all know, most, I'm gonna say most, many of the people you see walking around here who are pretending to have successful businesses, they're totally full of shit. And you can tell they're totally full of shit because you ask them like a few simple questions and very quickly you understand they don't have their first clue about any numbers in their business. They don't know what their burn rate is. They don't know what their cost of delivering services is. They don't have the basic fundamentals of bookkeeping in place, which I'm not saying you can't make some money once in a while just speculating. What I'm saying is you can't build and sustain a real business without good bookkeeping to underpin the whole thing. At least you can't do it for long. It will eventually fall apart. Anyway, I went around the booths earlier today and it's like very quick to figure out who's real and who's full of crap when you have a few questions to ask. Anyway, so the third thing that the smart contract, the third category that the smart contract is going to have to deal with is how you take payment. So are you taking payment in Bitcoin? Raise your hand if you take payment in Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you take payment in Bitcoin? Raise your hand if you take payment in Ethereum. Raise your hand if you take payment in any other kind of cryptocurrency. I'm not raising my hand because I don't. Bitcoin, Ethereum, yes, no others. Not yet. Maybe I will someday. Raise your hand if you take payment in some form of fiat currency. All right? So, is the smart contract going to adjust the cryptocurrency to the exchange rate of a fiat currency, or is the smart contract going to be written native in the cryptocurrency of your choice? Okay, so are you going to charge 1 Bitcoin, or are you going to charge $60,000 US in Bitcoin? Who wants to pay $60,000 US in Bitcoin? Let's assume $60,000 is the price we've agreed. And if I give you the option to sign the contract in US currency payable in Bitcoin, would you rather sign that contract, or would you rather sign a contract for just 1 Bitcoin? And you know what? If Bitcoin goes up to $65,000, well, you still paid 1 Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin goes down to $55,000, well, you know what? You still paid 1 Bitcoin. Or do you want to be paying more or less Bitcoin depending on its exchange rate? So I'm just curious. Raise your hand if you'd rather sign the contract based in US currency, paid in Bitcoin. Raise your hand. All right. Raise your hand if you'd rather sign the contract payable in Bitcoin, irrespective of its relationship with the US dollar. Raise your hand if you have never even given this a thought before, and that's why you're not raising your hand before. But this is the kind of stuff that's got to be thought through in your smart contract, right? This is exactly the point. I'm not telling you what the right answer is. I'm telling you these are the kinds of questions that serious business people are going to have to take very seriously and evaluate before you start entering into your smart contracts, or you're going to start having some real problems. All right. Another curious thing is, when will you no longer need an exchange rate? Anyone have any thoughts on that? When will you no longer be expressing Bitcoin in terms of an exchange rate? You keep counting your watch, but I don't have a watch on, so I don't know what that means. Oh, okay, got it. So when do you think that we're going to stop talking about Bitcoin in terms of the US dollar? Think about this. Do you think that in Japan, when you go to a restaurant and they tell you that the price of your dinner is going to be however many yen, they say, that'll be X number of US dollars. Do you think that when you're in England and they say that that pair of shoes you're going to buy is however many pounds, they say that'll be, in other words, this many US dollars? Do you understand that we haven't really, we're just barely scratching the surface of cryptocurrency? We are still such massively early adopters because most of the world isn't even aware of it. Most of the world doesn't even accept it. And I would venture to say there probably aren't 100,000 people on the planet right now. That doesn't sound like much when you think of how many people are on the planet. There probably aren't even 100,000 people on the planet right now who are really seriously asking themselves when they're going to stop thinking about cryptocurrency in terms of its relationship to fiat currency, and they're just going to think of the cryptocurrency in terms of cryptocurrency, right? Like here in the United States, we don't say, oh, you know what, the airline ticket is, $1,000. Well, what is that in pesos? We don't give a shit because we earn US dollars, we spend US dollars, we live US dollars. Smart contracts are going to go native and stop expressing themselves in terms of fiat currency. It's just something to be aware of. All right. Here's an interesting question. What if the smart contract is written, but the client, the customer, the passenger, the patient, whatever you call the person you do business with in your business, what if they decide they no longer want to pay you? What if they think they have a right to no longer pay you? What if they think you haven't honored your obligations? What if they think the service that they thought they were paying for isn't worth it anymore and they don't want to keep paying you? How do you create a smart contract that gives the parties to it, the opportunity to resolve their disputes? Because that's the whole thing about smart contracts. They just happen automatically, right? They're self-executing by the machine. And how are we going to have programmers who are able to create smart contracts that don't cause inadvertent wars? Because that's what happens when a contract doesn't give the parties to it a way to resolve their differences or a way to resolve their disputes. You literally force people to go to war. All right. In my business, sometimes something will happen in someone's business, and even though they're supposed to pay me $5,000 a month every month on the 15th of the month, and the smart contract can go to their wallet, can go to their bank account to get payment, get payment, get payment, get payment, get payment. Sometimes they call and they say, hey, listen, I'm having a temporary cash crunch. Instead of paying you on the 15th, can I pay you on the 20th? And if they're a good customer, a good client, I say, sure, why not? I'll work with you. I understand how business goes sometimes. Well, how do you tell the smart contract that you're making the exception? And how do you make sure that the exception is a one-time exception and you don't screw up the whole smart contract, right? Are you a programmer and you say, no problem, I'll just go in and adjust the line of code? Or do you have a programmer who works for you and that programmer I don't know the answers to these things. I'm saying to you, you got to be careful when you're hiring these programmers who say to you, I'm going to write your smart contract, because these are the things you have to think about in the real world of grown-up successful businesses. All right. What if the parties agree to modify the stack or the retainer or the fee? What if you were signed up with a program where I'm going to deliver services and we agree to a $5,000 a month fee, but hey, congratulations, your business has grown. This is fantastic. You're happy, we're happy, everyone celebrates, but your now growing business, instead of requiring a partial stack, requires a more complete stack of services, and now the fee is $7,500. How do we make this adjustment? Right? Because the smart contract was written like a laser-guided missile by the programmer who never anticipated the practical realities of what might happen in your business. And what do? Cancel the smart contract, start all over again? Is there a mechanism to adjust the smart contract, to modify it? I don't know, but these are the kinds of things you better be thinking about and make sure your programmer doesn't screw you up in your relationships. All right? Next, from which wallet? So is the smart contract keyed to your Coinbase wallet? Is the smart contract keyed to your Robinhood wallet? Is your smart contract keyed to your, who else has a favorite wallet? Call out a wallet. Your MetaMask wallet? Okay, you're calling out wallets. You get the idea, right? Is the smart contract going to first draw from the Coinbase wallet, and if the funds aren't there, then roll over to the MetaMask wallet? Or is it going to draw equally from each of them, right? What happens if you have a bank account? You know, in at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to have to figure out how to get smart contracts to tap into old-fashioned, boring, centralized bank accounts if we want to really grow successful businesses in most industries, right? Now, maybe if your entire industry is nothing but creating digital stuff and you're selling your digital stuff to other people who are buying your digital stuff and it 100% exists on the metaverse, on the blockchain, you don't need to tap into old-fashioned fiat-based bank accounts, but who's got a business like that? Most of us have businesses that have more overlap with the real world. And so we're going to have to figure out ways to get our smart contracts to negotiate their way through the relationship with the bank. Probably something involving ACH, I would imagine. But I'm not a programmer. But here's the point. You got to make sure your programmer is thinking about these things. All right? Notice provisions, default, change of terms of service, renewal, non-renewal, time to cure. Because one of the beautiful things about a smart contract is the trigger happens and it executes. But what happens if the trigger happens and it executes, but you don't necessarily want to put the person immediately into default because you want to maintain a longer-term relationship? Or what if the person you want to do business with says, fuck you, I'm not signing that contract unless you give me time to cure in case something happens? Your smart contract has to be built to have some provisions like this if it's going to really work in the real world. Jurisdiction. You know, where do we go to resolve our disputes if we disagree on the smart contract? Do we just go to the metaverse and put it to a vote of whoever's got the most computing power? Do we just go to a blockchain and put it to a vote of whoever's got the biggest staked interest in that blockchain? You know, pretty soon, the whole appeal of a decentralized world starts to turn in on itself, because instead of having tyranny by the minority, you wind up with tyranny of the majority. Get what I'm saying here, everyone? I promise you, people aren't thinking about this stuff when they're writing their smart contracts, at least not most of them. Not most of them I've spoken to. So these are things you need to be thinking about and anticipating when you hire your programmers to help you create your smart contracts for your business. So who will be the final arbiter of disputes? Are you going to defer to a court, like an old-fashioned court, the Miami-Dade County court system? Or are we going to start finding courts in the metaverse? And you know, what is going to be the credentials of this court in the metaverse? And who's going to hold these courts in the metaverse accountable for following whatever rules we all agree to? I mean, this is where this is going. And really my purpose here is not to tell you what you should or shouldn't decide is right for you. My purpose is to get you all thinking expansively, creatively, in ways that I have not seen many people thinking in my journey through the looking glass in this world. I've spoken with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, people who are committed enough to this world that they get on airplanes, they buy tickets, they check into hotel rooms, they buy booth space, they pay to be sponsors, they get up on stages. I mean, these are people who are probably, you got to figure, on the leading edge of thought leadership in this world. And most of the people I'm talking to, and I'm having these kinds of conversations with them, and I ask these kinds of questions, it's like, blah, 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 blah. They just have never thought about it before. Well, geez, you know, if our thought leaders in this space aren't thinking about this kind of stuff, we got some real problems, don't we? We talk about Web 3.0. This is Web 4.0 kind of stuff. All right. And last and not least, what about exigent circumstances? Exigent circumstances are what you want to have in a contract where you can say, listen, I couldn't fulfill my responsibilities under the contract because of these extenuating circumstances. I said exigent circumstance. I meant to say extenuating circumstances. I couldn't read my own handwriting. I'm sorry. That happens to me sometimes. I have bad handwriting. Anyway, the point I'm making is you want to have provisions that you're not going to be completely like nailed to the cross if you can't honor your contractual obligations because of extenuating circumstances. And you know, you got to be careful when your coder is like, oh great, I know exactly what to do. And they just start tapping away on their keyboard and making a code that, you know, that code is going to govern your business relationship with whoever you're doing business with. And that could affect your income. That could affect your rights of movement in and out of privately controlled places. That could ultimately control your rights of movement in society, right? Because what happens when someone sues you for breach of contract and you are required by law to show up in a court and answer for yourself? You know, you want to make sure you've got these things thought through. All right, so we're going to do a panel, but before we do a panel, I just want to throw it open if you have any questions, and we'll make up the time later. No questions. Thoughts, ideas, suggestions? Yes, get a microphone over there, please. John, Deanna, someone.
I can talk really loud.
Yeah, just talk really loud till we get the microphone, but get the microphone anyway.
So one of the things that I'm really curious about, smart contracts, blockchain as it stands right now is...
Hang on, the microphone's coming because I'm not going to be able to repeat your whole question.
All right, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, great, thank you.
So you're talking about smart contracts, and as everything stands right now, most blockchains are publicly visible. I'm a business, I run some private entity, and I don't want everyone to be able to go on and read my smart contract. What do we do about that?
I believe there's a way to keep that private. I'm not a programmer. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. Are there any coders who write smart contracts for a living who might be able to give us some guidance on that?
So I'll actually answer my own question. I just wanted people to think about it.
Yeah,
so
that's a great question. How do
if you guys are here and you're
might
interested,
want to keep the terms of the contract confidential.
right, or
Brilliant.
any of your data on Web3, right?
Absolutely.
Head down to the booth, talk to Secret Network. So
Sorry?
Secret Network.
There's a booth called Secret Network.
Yep. And what they've done is they have taken the concept of Ethereum, smart contracts, NFTs, and all of that, but it's private by default. So every contract or every transaction, everything that's computed on those contracts, 100% private down to the hardware level. So something to think about is when we get into these conversations about utilizing these things for small businesses, big businesses, people that don't want everything that they do to be public, we have to privatize that data, and that's not as easily done right now with a lot of the networks that exist.
There's lots of situations I can think of where people want to have the terms of the contract confidential. Are you related to or connected to Secret Network?
I am. Feel free to come chat.
So would you like a tip on how to make a shit ton of money from stage?
Sure. Yes.
For real? I mean, if you want to or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Be like really, really like lead with, I have an interest in it. Because the whole time you were talking, everyone wasn't really paying attention to you. We were all thinking the same thing. We were all thinking, I wonder if he's part of that group. If you just said that in the beginning, out of the way, now you can just brag the shit out of it. So tell us, secretnetwork.com.
Yeah. Feel free to come grab. I've got cards you guys can take, but they're downstairs. Some of our core developers are down there as well. So
All right.
if you
Are
want
you
to
the
ask like,
founder?
really detailed questions, feel free.
Are you the founder?
No. I do business development for the network.
Good. All right. Secret Network downstairs. Good plug.
So going back to
Are you
thinking of,
affiliated with anything you're about to plug?
I'm an investor in Secret Network. No, I'm kidding.
I'm a secret investor in Secret Network.
So going back to the concept of like all these projects proposing these new governance systems and having a lack of arbitration that is well versed in how to do this, are you seeing any developments from the legal space of pivoting to be able to handle all these projects? Because you read all these white papers and you see all these concepts of like how this is going to be governed once these projects are live, but there's so, like you said, there's so little actual development happening there. I was just wondering, are you seeing legal firms or certain types of professionals be able to offer infrastructure around that? Because it seems like a huge opportunity.
I think, let me rephrase the question and see if this is your question, if I'm understanding correctly. I think what you're asking me is this whole industry is beginning to explode. And there's this massive need for a specialized knowledge of professionals who are contracts lawyers and who also get this stuff. And I think your question is, are there a whole bunch of highly entrepreneurial, ambitious lawyers who are smart enough to recognize this massive opportunity to build a wildly profitable law firm in this really interesting niche space? Is that your question?
That's absolutely my question. I think you said it better than I did. Thanks.
That's only because I keep saying it over and over and over again to all the lawyers who will listen. And sadly, most of them are pretty oblivious to it.
Yeah,
Which only makes a bigger opportunity for everyone who gets it. Because you're right, there will be a shortage of real talent in this space.
I would just say, to add to that, like the DAO tooling. So you see these DAOs coming out, but I would think it would be really a great opportunity to pair with DAOs to offer arbitration stacks that can integrate into their DAO tooling. I think that would be a really interesting.
Are you an attorney?
No, I'm not. I'm probably going to need one eventually.
Everyone needs an attorney eventually. And a good tax strategist too.
Also looking for that.
And just in the interest of full disclosure, we've never met before, right? We've never spoken before?
No,
You don't know me, I don't know you.
I'm not promoting your business right now.
I did not put you up to this question, correct?
Correct.
It just happens to be a total coincidence that she asked exactly the question that I have been standing on stage and saying to every lawyer that will listen, this is a massive opportunity, take advantage of it. There's a reason why the 1% is the 1% and everyone else isn't.
Let's talk later.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, raise your
Sure,
hand
let's
if
connect.
you're an attorney.
Yes.
Raise your hand if you fucking get it.
Yes.
Raise your hand if you're an attorney. Wait, raise your hand if you're an attorney and you get it. Raise your hand. Now pay attention. You watching? Biz dev guy? All right. Now raise your hand if you're an attorney. Keep your hand up. Raise your hand if you're an attorney and your business has grown by at least 50% in the last year or two. See all the other attorneys putting their hands down? Now raise your hand if you're an attorney and a company, which I own, called How to Manage a Small Law Firm, actively manages your business with you. All right, now put your hand back up if you're an attorney and you'd like to grow your business by at least 50%. Put your hands down. You guys already do it. Put your hands down. Put your hands up if you're an attorney. You're not a member of How to Manage a Small Law Firm. Where all the hands go. And now they're afraid to put their hands up. And this is exactly the point. I'm just giving them an opportunity to grow their business by 50%, and they put their hands down. This is what happens when you present exciting opportunities to a lot of attorneys. They literally run and hide because they don't know how to think unless there's a precedent for it. This is what they do to us in law school. They brainwash us to only think in terms of precedent. All right. You're welcome. Thank you for giving me that softball pitch.
So I know that law schools
And
are,
would everyone on my team, would all of my members, all the members who are going to be on stage at the next panel, get yourselves ready? Because we're about to get up on the panel. If you're going to be on the next panel, go see John. So what's next? Okay, we'll do the panel, then we'll do her. We'll make it up. Jeff's not here. Question.
just a
Wait, she's got the mic.
quick reaction to the last question asker. Law schools are teaching this stuff now. Northwestern Pritzker is teaching this stuff now.
Great. So all you got to do is wait for the existing entering class to graduate in 3 years, pass the bar exam, start their own law firm, and 4 years from now, you'll have a lawyer who actually knows this stuff.
I just think that it's probably not as, lawyers aren't as oblivious as you're making them out to be, right? And I don't think coders are either. I think software developers are starting to work with attorneys before writing smart contracts in many, many cases.
That is welcome news to my ears. You're obviously talking to different lawyers and different coders than I do.
No, well, his time on like 2:30.
I have been talking to,
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to lawyers for a living. That's all I do most of the day is talk to lawyers. And most lawyers are pretty intimidated by this stuff. And I just keep seeing coders writing contracts without knowing the first thing about how to actually write a real contract. But if you know a pool of coders and a pool of lawyers who understand this stuff, by all means, let us know because there's obviously a need for it.